All right. Hello, everybody. So this is for a special between Passover and Shavuot. So why would we talk about anything specific now? Because right now we're counting the Omer. And the Omer is a series of 7 weeks. You count day by day until you get to the holiday of Shavuot. So the Kabbalists don't let this opportunity just pass by. Numbers are very important. And these 50 days are used in the Kabbalistic tradition to invite God more deeply into this world through a series of unifications of the Sefirot. So we're going to be talking about exactly what that means today. So first of all, how do these Sefirot work? So I'll show you, this is my Omer counter, and in most Sidorim, it happens not to be in our weekday Sidor Lev Shalem, but in most other Sidorim, you have actually the Sefirot written in to the Omer counting itself. So here, if you look very closely, in the box it says Hayom Shlosha Yamim LaOmer. Today is the third day of the Omer. But then inside here, you'll actually, let's see if I can get this. It says in little letters, Tiferet Shebechesed. Tiferet, that is in Chesed. And those are actually Sefirot. What do I mean Sefirot? I'll show you this great picture. Here. So this is a picture of the Sefirot. And if you have a Jewish Encyclopedia Judaica, this is on page 491. You're welcome to turn to it. And so when we said Tiferet Shebechesed, this is the Tiferet sphere, and Chesed actually is right here. It's next to the sphere of Gevura. And so every day between Passover and Shavuot, we actually, starting with Chesed, work our way down. So we'll go Chesed, Chesed Shebechesed, Gevura Shebechesed, Tiferet Shebechesed, Netzach in Chesed, Hod Vechesed, Yisod Vechesed, and then Malchut Bechesed. And then we go again using the Sefirot chart, bringing each one of these Sefirot down. The lowest is Malchut, and that is kind of the gate through which we know God. God is, as we'll read in a second, this is sort of in the Kabbalistic tradition how God comes into this world, or rather kind of a history almost of how God created this world and makes his presence known. So today we're going to be reading about the Sefirot through the book Me'or Anayim. The Me'or Anayim is written by Menachem of Chernobyl, who lived from roughly 1730 to 1798-ish. So this comes from his book, and we're going to learn it as a way to understand the Sefirot and what their purpose is. So we'll start from the top. And by the way, I know that this conversation about Sefirot is going to introduce a lot of concepts that may be unfamiliar. And that's okay. You're welcome to email me afterwards or write in the chat if you have a specific question. I'll make sure to keep an eye on the chat too. Okay, so starting from, this is from the Me'or Anayim. It's well known that the 10 sayings by means of which the world was created are the 10 qualities which the holy books called the Sefirot. So there are 10 utterances in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, through which the world was created, and the Kabbalists say each one of those utterances, each one of those moments that God speaks in creation is actually God coming through one of these Sefirot. The creation of the world was by means of these 10 qualities. For God is good, and it belongs to the nature of the good to be benevolent to others. So now we're going to ask the question, why would God even create the world? So God here, according to Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, says that God is good, and God wants to be good to others, but unless there are others, for whom God can be good, to whom God can be good, then God isn't realizing God's full self. So God wished, therefore, that there be creatures who could recognize his attributes and deeds, and that God be called compassionate, gracious, and long-suffering. Now all this could only have been realized in a world in which there are creatures, and it was God's will to create such a world so that creatures could recognize God's greatness. However, since God is Ein Sof, which means in Hebrew no end, infinite, the Kabbalistic name for God is Ein Sof, which is, it means there's no end, infinite, incomprehensible. It was impossible for man to have any apprehension of God, since God is infinite. Consequently, God decreed in God's wisdom that the world be created by means of these midot, which also mean measures. So called because, as it were, God emerged in limited measures, so that God's creatures could have some slight apprehension of God's unity, knowing that there is a creator and a ruler, and that God is infinite and has brought all things into being. Okay, so in the first part, we've answered the question why God would want to create the world, and also the problem God has in creating a world. God is unknowable, God is infinite and incomprehensible to the human mind. And actually, in the Sefirot chart, the words Ein Sof are actually here at the very top. This is kind of the starting position of God. And God has to figure out a way to emanate into the world, which is going to be down here. So God is up here, unknowable, and now God is going to try to figure out how to emanate into the world. And so the Me'or Naim says God does this through midot, limited measures. So God, in the same way, my friend Rabbi Adam Greenwald, I think, described it best. He said, the Sefirot work like a nuclear power plant. Imagine you have a light bulb, and you want to get this light bulb to shine, and you have a nuclear power plant. Can you just plug the light bulb straight into the power plant? No, there would be way too much electricity. The light bulb would explode. It could not handle that level of electricity. And so what we do for electricity is we set up a series of transformers, restricting that electricity more and more and more until it is usable, to light a light bulb. So too, these Sefirot take that ineffable, unknowable quality of Ein Sof, of infinite unknowability, and concentrates little by little, restricting itself until it can be known in a physical world. So let's continue. So God measured God's self out, as it were, from quality to quality, that is, from sphere to sphere, for the highest of which is called Ayin, nothing, and it represents a stage of which as yet there cannot be any apprehension. God then measured himself out, as it were, from quality to quality by a chain process of cause and effect down to the 10th quality called Malchut. So God restricts God's self quality after quality until getting to the sphere of Malchut, which this is the sphere that we can know in this world, which is Malchut. That's our access point to God. And through that 10th quality, which is Malchut, creatures are able to recognize the majesty of God's reign, that God is king over the earth and created everything out of nothing. As the verse says, this is the gate of the Lord the righteous shall enter into it. In Hebrew, that's Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, avovam odeya. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous shall enter into it. And this is the gate of the Lord. Notice the verse that I just shared in Hebrew isn't exactly this one, but we have this idea of Pitchu li sha'arei tzedek, open the gates for me. When we talk about gates, this is the specific gate, according to the Sefirot, according to the Kabbalah, that we can enter and know God, which is this lower sphere of Malchut. For this quality, in the gateway and doorway through which everyone who desires to worship God can take upon him or herself the yoke of Torah, and it's well known that there's no other means of entrance than through this quality. It is the final hey of the special divine name, and it represents the 5 modes of articulation, providing man's mouth with the power of speech, so that one can become attached to God. So God's name, Yud He Vav He, is an expression of the Sefirot. The Yud being the top, representing the Ein Sof, and then through the He and the Vav, that's the middle of the Sefirot chart, and then the final He represents Malchut. And why is that? The Meor Anayim says that that's because He in Gematria is 5, then it's through the 5 what are they called? The 5 ways we speak that we come to know God, and it's through that Hey that God speaks to us. The 5 modes of articulation, specifically gutturals, palatals, dentals, labials, and sibilants. And so that Hey, that last Hey of God's name, represents the lowest part of the Sefirot chart, the way we enter to God, which is, first of all, we enter through speech, we enter through prayer, and many Hasidic masters will also, say we enter through actually having a friendly, ongoing conversation and relationship with God using words. But that Hey also represents God speaking to us. And God can only speak to us in that lowest sphere of Malchut. That's why the Hey becomes the lowest the lowest sphere. Okay, we're going to continue. Let me see if there's anything else I want to mention there. Okay, so we've established now that God is unknowable up here, called Ayin, called nothingness, called Ein Sof, and that God, through the Sefirot, is able to restrict God's self enough to finally enter the sphere of Malchut and then come into this world. So, let us continue. All this is by the grace of God, so that God's creatures might comprehend God's sovereignty and lordship. He concentrated himself using tzimtzum. That is that special kind of restricting that God does. God concentrated himself, as it were, from quality to quality, down to the final quality, which is Malchut. As we know from the holy books, every person in Israel, since, as we have stated on a previous occasion, Israel is an actual portion of God, has in him and herself something of these 10 qualities, which, as is well known, are one's divinity. The more a person proceeds from stage to stage, once he has entered this gate as above, the more one will recognize and the more one will comprehend the greatness of God's divinity as expressed in God's supernal qualities. And the stronger will be these qualities as they are firmly fixed in that portion of one's own soul, which derives from these supernal qualities. So the Menorah 9 now is saying, what does it mean to enter the gate, as it were? What does it mean to access that lowest sphere of Malchut and know God? So he says, actually, and the Meor Naim and the Hasidim usually limit this to Jews, but we can say this for all people, that each one of us has some divine in us. We are connected to the Ein Sof, to this incredible oneness, incredible unity, this unknowable infinitude. And when we know God, when we come to know God, the Oranaim says the only way we come to know God is actually through knowing that which is godly in ourselves. And when we start to enter into this relationship with God, when we find an access point into Malchut, into this lowest sphere, it's actually through that entranceway which is already planted in our own soul. And we can climb this ladder, as it were, not to the top. We can't know God. But these lower 7 Sefirot, tradition says this is how far we can get in our relationship with God. We can know God in these lower 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in these lower 7 Sefirot. This is the access point, but through enough concentration, through prayer, through study, through acts, through tzedakah, through mitzvot, and the right concentration, and the Hasidim would also say through a broken heart, which is very important, you can access God climbing the Sefirah ladder, starting with Malchut and then working your way up. Okay, we'll read this last paragraph together. However, it was really impossible for the supernal qualities to become awakened within a person, since one is clothed with a coarse garment of the material body. So this is the problem. How, therefore, a love so refined, or how could we ever come to fear God or realize any of the other qualities? The physical nature of man in the body would not have allowed us to be awakened to such pure spirituality. Consequently, God caused God's qualities also to be concentrated in the material, in such things as the love of physical pleasure in this world of matter and external fears, such as the fear of punishment and fear that men have for one another. This process was by stages, the supernal qualities expanding by means of cause and effect until they came down into extremely low things. All this was for one purpose only. That as a result of one's physical nature, which desires physical pleasure, there'll be awakened in a person the quality of love that is inherent in the things one loves. Once one is sufficiently intelligent and sufficiently one of faith to see that this is really the quality of love that the Creator, blessed be He, has measured out and concentrated Himself into this quality in the world, expanding until it reached the thing that is loved solely for the purpose of awakening that quality in man for him to grasp. Then he will tremble and will seize hold of that love that has been awakened in him, and will begin to love the Creator, blessed be He, with the most powerful love. So, we start by saying there is a problem, which is it's very hard to connect to God in the material world, because God is infinite, beyond body. So how could we possibly connect to God? We can access as a way to build our relationship with God. So when he uses kind of two extremes. He says our love for physical pleasure and our fear of another person. Those should be used as a way to see God in this world. So when one feels attraction, when one feels love, one should stop and say, this love actually comes from God. This love is only a piece of what God's love is like. And so through the physical world, we come to know God. And that is, as it were, the first step into, Malchut, into this lowest sphere. The first step is recognizing that even in the material world, and maybe that's the first step, is knowing that in the material world itself, God's qualities can be accessed. And so through a kind of, perspective shift. Instead of saying, I love this person just because they're, somebody who I connect with. If you can take that love and say, this love that I'm feeling for this person is the kind of love that exists in God. That's the first step into that relationship with God, into that Malchut gate. So now I want to jump back to the question of what is going on between Passover and Shavuot when we count the Sefirot. So remember, I said that we can only know God in the lower 7 Sefirot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's in these Sefirot that we're going to unify over 49 days. 7 times 7 is 49. And so each one of these is going to be in relationship with each other for the next 7 weeks. So we started by saying Chesed Shebechesed. Chesed is here. Chesed just comes right before Gevura. And then we have Gevura Shebechesed, Tiferet Shebechesed, Netzach in Chesed, Hod in Chesed, Yesod in Chesed, Malchut in Chesed. And then we do the same thing with Gevura. So focusing on Gevura, we have Chesed Shebegevura, Gevura in Gevura, Tiferet in Gevura, Netzach Gevura, Hod Gevura, Yesod Gevura, Malchut Gevura. Third week, we focus on Tiferet. And then all of the Sefirot then get unified through Tiferet. We have Chesed Tiferet, Gedula and Tiferet, Tiferet and Tiferet, Netzach Tiferet. And we do that all the way until the last week, which is Malchut, which is Chesed and Malchut, Gedula and Malchut, Tiferet and Malchut, Netzach and Malchut, Hod and Malchut, Yesod and Malchut, Malchut and Malchut, and then we're at Shavuot. So what we're doing there is 2 things. First, we're unifying them because each one of them is going to be in a relationship with the other. It's going to be in a relationship as both, the primary, sphere being related to, and the one that's relating to the primary sphere of that week. So this week, the primary sphere is Chesed, and so each one of the spheres is going to be relating back to Chesed. Gevura with Chesed, Tiferet with Chesed, Netzach with Chesed. And then next week, the primary sphere is going to be Gevura, and so they're all going to be relating to Gevura. And so each one of these is in relationship with the other one. And then the other thing is, if you notice, it always leads, down, as it were, through Malchut. And so we are in this unification, bringing each one of these Sefirot down through Malchut and actualizing them in this world in the same way that God took God's self, up here, this Ein Sof, this unknowability, and through the Sefirot, came out into the world. So we're doing the same, bringing each one of these spheres down through Malchut. And that's, in between Passover and Shavuot, kind of the Kabbalistic tradition of how we use this time and how we think about this time. So with that, we'll say Shavua Tov. It appears like there were some buffering problems in the middle of this, so I hope it wasn't too distracting. It distracted me a little bit, but I hope for you, you got the main point. And I wish you a Shavua Tov, a Chag Sameach. If you have not counted the Omer, tonight is the 3rd night of the Omer, which is Tiferet Shebechesed, in case you want to unify the Sefirot. And looking forward to next time, and have a wonderful rest of your Passover holiday. Bye, everybody.